Namaskar and welcome to this edition of DD Dialogue. As the world continues to grapple the corona outbreak situation back home in India, the centre continues to firm up and bolster the already existing robust infrastructure, and this is, remember, happening 24/7, every passing second, every passing minute. In this special edition of DD Dialogue, which happens to be a signature show of national broadcaster Doordarshan, we're going to talk about the public health outreach on the sidelines of fighting corona, particular focus on organizations like WHO and UNICEF, what's their assessment of the way it's been handled and contained by our government, and what are the roles, procedures, SOPs that have been followed by various organizations besides the health ministry, the other verticals like Niti Aayog, etc. And last but not important, but most importantly, the larger import, the message of Prime Minister Modi's national address on COVID-19 on national broadcaster. What was the larger message? And to begin with, in fact, we're extremely honored to have a very distinguished panel on Doordarshan on the special edition of DD Dialogue. We are joined by Dr. Hendrik Bekkedem. He is the representative to India from WHO, World Health Organization. Thank you so much, Dr. Bekkedem, for, in fact, I think this is your exclusive appearance and first television appearance since the outbreak of corona crisis here in India. We really appreciate you joining us, and very, very honored to have with us on the show also Dr. Yasmin Haque, UNICEF India representative. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. We really appreciate you joining us, and also extremely glad to have Ambassador Vishnu Prakash joining us on the special edition. Very glad to have with us also Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi, Director General RIS. And very, very honored to have with us Dr. V.K. Paul, Member Health, Niti Aayog. In fact, I'm quickly going to start with the WHO assessment of the way the crisis, in fact, if I may be allowed to use the word crisis here, in terms of containment. Do you think India has been ahead of the curve so far, vis-a-vis the way the situation has been handled by other developing countries? I understand there cannot be direct comparisons, but especially the way we have moved in the last 72 hours.
Thank you very much. I think what has been very clear that India has taken it very seriously from the onset. On the 31st of December 2019, it was reported to WHO that there was a new disease. I think in a very short time it was already discovered that there was a new virus involved, new coronavirus. And as soon as I think India heard about it, then they started taking it very seriously. What do I mean with this? The Ministry of Health, the Secretary of Health, and the whole team started very much looking at the issue. And I think within a few days' time, the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office was directly already involved. And I think it has been very encouraging. And what's very important with when you have a threat of a disease, you need to start as early as possible. And for this one, I dare to say, from India started very early in the game, taking it very seriously.
You agree India started very early, yes?
Yes, it's absolutely true. They did not wait for it to become a public health event of international concern, which was at a certain moment declared. It also didn't wait that WHO said it is now a pandemic. And that is very important, because I think if you deal with a virus, if you deal with a disease, then the early part is very important. And for that one, I think we give India highly credit from that they have been mobilizing early, but also having a whole government approach. Not only the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health worked with other ministries. The leadership from the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office was also very clearly felt.
Yes. And do you agree with Dr. Bekkedem, ma'am? And also with that, I want to know from you, there are a lot of challenges now are we really looking at in terms of population density, cultural diversity, economic disparities also to some extent, and especially when we talk about children here, that there is an advisory now below 10. They're advised to stay back home, children being more vulnerable to this kind of virus. What is UNICEF's take on it?
So first of all, I'd echo what Hank has just said about the strength with which action had already started in India. And it's really important for us to understand, and I'm sure we're all feeling it, that this is something unprecedented. Yes. The experience globally, the way we're seeing events unfold in India, we are trying to battle an enemy that we can't really see in a way. Routine life for children is being overturned in a way. Children are being told, no, you don't go to school, no, you're not going to go out in the playing fields.
And explaining children social distancing, it's
absolutely. Well, you know, when for children that contact and being close is so important. It's also going to be looking at, you know, the challenges you talked about, the disparities that are existing in India. Are we reaching everyone who especially needs to be reached? We know that the virus does not you know, listen to boundaries. It discriminates. It does not discriminate any particular person or caste or ethnicity. We know the elderly are more vulnerable. We know people who have underlying health conditions are more vulnerable, but no one is exempt. It can affect anyone. So that's where it's so important that as a community we come together and look at, all right, what does this mean? How does education adapt? How does health service adapt to it? And we've really been working very closely with WHO and supporting the Ministry of Health in getting the messaging out. You know, washing your hands frequently with soap, you know, not sneezing in open, making sure that if you're not feeling well, go and you run a fever and you have signs of a flu, consult with a doctor. And these messages, debunking all the myths that are out there, it's really important that we continue with that.
Ambassador Prakash, let's also a bit focus about the larger message of the imported Prime Minister's national address yesterday. Highly anticipated, but would you agree one of the highlights was also that nothing was imposed. Voluntarily, the Prime Minister's outreach coming straight from the heart, whether it is curfew for the people, by the people, and very far-sighted approach, as if you have the senior member of the family trying to take control of the situation. In fact, why I'm saying this because I happen to read that first quote from you, the Twitter quote. So that's making some difference on ground. It's been embraced by the people.
Oh, absolutely. We were all looking at, waiting for the speech with great anticipation. But let me say, I was not ready for what I heard, what I saw. It was not the address of a national leader, it was the address of a statesman, as far as I am concerned. And in my adult life, I do not recall having heard, seen such an inspirational address, because as you very rightly said, it came from the heart. You know, when the leader of a nation is seen talking about something so caringly, with so much of feel. Now, other than amongst other things, he said, look, there's a vulnerable segment of the society, and please take care of them. They also have families to feed. I think that was caring. The people's curfew, or the Janta curfew, I think is one of the very thoughtful moves. It is a full dress rehearsal, so to say, you know, because as my co-panelist said, we are dealing with an enemy that we do not know, we do not see. Here, let me bring in Chancellor Angela Merkel, who is a very thoughtful leader, who has in fact gone to the extent of saying that after Second World War, it's perhaps the most biggest challenge the world is grappling with. So when you have a problem of this magnitude, and the leadership is provided up by the Prime Minister, who talks about all the dimensions, he said, look, everybody has to participate. Let us salute those who are contributing. Let us take care. I thought it was a wonderful address, and it has inspired people to voluntarily follow, do what is required, so that we can together try to defeat this huge crisis that confronts the nation.
Okay, and that brings me to this question of dealing with economic challenges. Lot of build-up and lot of anticipation already, Dr. Chaturvedi, is on the ground. We do know, as was also reiterated by Prime Minister, a task force to deal with the economic challenges up ahead, and we are already braced up for that. Now, when we talk about the economic imperatives, I'm going to come to the international scenario a little later, how China and other countries have dealt with it. But on domestic front, what is your assessment?
See, 3 points are absolutely important here. The Reserve Bank of India has already acted, and almost a week back, the governor has already announced the measures that are required in terms of readjusting the amount of loans that companies and institutions have borrowed, the rate of interest that is required to be adjusted, the amount of liquidity that is needed in the market. All three have been taken care of, and Reserve Bank is on record. Prime Minister was also very explicit yesterday in his address in terms of supporting the informal sector of the economy, which is a huge component of our economy. So the job security, the livelihood security, and of course supply of essentials. So that dimension of economy is important. We are already hearing various calculations that are coming in, particularly in tourism, the sectors that are related to pharma, but where the supply side disruptions are there. So that I think is a huge issue. But I was counting first on the sectors where livelihood security is a bigger threat, and tourism is a huge sector. The auto component and auto parts industries that are there. Then are the larger supply side constraints which we are facing in across the sectors. So here the medical devices, the drugs, pharmaceuticals, and I think the effort that is now there in terms of bringing in other parts of the economy, particularly the white goods that we have been importing, or the parts and components that are being imported. So you see a huge disruption that is likely to happen.
And we have this heavy dependence on China, let's face it. I was coming to that question, Dr. Paul, Member Health, Niti Aayog. I think you, in the last 1 week, Niti Aayog has had several meetings with the pharma representatives, and here, time and again, this question of API, that is active pharma ingredients. I will not get into the technicalities of it, but then the kind of crisis that we are grappling with it. API is an issue, and we don't have to look at the comparison to compete with China, but how are we actually dealing with the situation? Because China was the worst affected few months back, and we need China when it comes to APIs and other drug intermediaries. Are we self-sufficient right now to deal with the situation?
Two levels. One, that the API problem has been somewhat overstated. When we went through the analyses, we discovered that it's okay, there is a challenge, there are going to be problems, there are problems, and China is a major supplier. But when we looked at our capacities and disaggregated the various types of API, the situation is not all that alarming. Having said that, we definitely have to give a boost to our API industry.
And how
we were the leaders. We were the leaders. We have the capacity, we have the entrepreneurial system and people. And that task has been systematically taken up, and an action plan has been prepared, and a stimulus to this industry is being ensured, and plan B are also ready.
So quickly, supply chain is not disrupted. Rest assured, challenges on economic domestic markets front will be dealt with. Are we, I'm going to come to you as well, looking at some specific policy measures that are being drafted, if you could share with our viewers on the national channel, because the country deserves to know. In the light of this anticipation, Dr. Paul, markets are going down, the state of economy might see a further slump. How do we deal with that situation? Sir.
Sachin first.
No, I think no. Yes. I think the efforts that are required, they are already been rolled out. As we all are talking in this room, the finance minister in another room is holding the conversations that are required with all the key ministers. All the key economists have been consulted, and the round of efforts that are required are already on. So I think what point Hank made in context of a specific health security challenge, I think government is equally sensitive, concerned, and proactive in handling the economic crisis which is unfolding. It's not specific to India. See, we are in an interdependent world. Globalization has affected and has been part of our production chain, something that we celebrated till few months back, and now we think that we all should be self-reliant. I think time has come, and I must congratulate the government in terms of thinking of the SARC as a starting point. So Prime Minister's effort in terms of handling the expertise that we have, the goods that we have, I think this is the time for economy to invest more on global public goods that are required in terms of continuing the process that is required. Of course, due care is to be taken, but I think economy is being paid attention in the fullest manner that the government can do at this point. And definitely on your point of disruption in supply chain, as I said, automobiles, the pharmaceuticals, software industry and supply of hardware. All the 4 sectors, Niti Aayog has already drawn out a major roadmap on this. The Vice Chairman Niti Aayog has been actively working out details of this with the Finance Ministry, and then are the 7 ministries, including the Ministry of Small and Medium Enterprises, which have been made the fulcrum of this revival process, along with the adjustments of the debt that the companies are ending up with.
Yes.
So this is a very tough time, and we are already seeing the efforts being made.
Okay.
There are 3 goals,
sure.
I think,
Yes, please.
to add to what Sachinji has said. We must recognize that at this point in time, at the macro level, the big macro level, we have 3 goals. First, protect lives, save lives, and there's no question about it. Second, protect the interest and well-being of the poor. And then, in consonance, protect our economy, protect our growth, and to make sure that we compensate, we are able to respond to all these 3 challenges.
Yes. Ambassador Prakash, you wanted to come?
I completely agree with that, that at the moment the challenge is to protect lives, protect health, well-being of the people, but the economic dimension, from what I've been reading and talking to people, is going to be, it seems that going to be huge. Let's try to put a number to it. The global GDP is about $87 trillion. And it seems that this crisis will last at least for a few months. So, and the global economy, the world economy as it is, was facing headwinds. Now, if at a conservative estimate, there is a 0.5% contraction, although the estimate is between 0.5 to 1%, we are looking at a global contraction of close to $1 trillion, $870 billion or around $900 billion. So it's going to be a serious contraction, and a recession has already been spoken of. The D word nobody is talking, and rightly so. And it's in addition to these 4 sectors, it is the transport sector, it's the hospitality sector, it's the service industry. Everything is going to be impacted.
We will talk about the blueprint in place, because now this coronavirus, the whole narrative is not only confined to precautions and not panic the health aspect of it. It's gone multidimensional. The diplomacy, socio-economic, education sector, much more. Coming to the education part, I'm coming to you also, Dr. Hendrik. But ma'am, there is this lot of debate going on, a certain sense of panic one can sense when it comes to en masse testing. Is that really required, or should testing be just confined to those who are showing symptoms with a certain travel history, etc.? Prime Minister yesterday said it very clearly, do not put pressure on system, but at the end of the day, be very, very particular and careful about your health. It starts with you. But UNICEF's assessment so far, in terms of testing infrastructure available, I'm talking about pan-India. What is UNICEF's assessment?
So that I'll actually ask Haque to look more into, because that's, but I would just like to draw on the economic impact on it, because how does that translate into the the life of the child? So the child is at home, not, school is going to be closed for a while, movement is going to be restricted. At the same time, some parents might not be working. Either they're having to work from home, in which case we're lucky, but some parents, like even the Prime Minister highlighted, that the daily wage earner, the informal sector worker, if they are at home, what does it breed? When you're without work, when you're worried about your family, it breeds anxiety.
Yes.
It breeds panic, not just about the virus, but what's going to happen? Where will I get the next meal from? And I think that's where having from the very start this focus on the economic package, looking at social protection measures for children, for the poor. Now, India has a great existing system of schemes for children, for elderly, for the most vulnerable. What's our opportunity now to see how do we make sure that it definitely gets to those who need it the most? and without, you know, getting into delays in structures and systems. But I think there is the ability, or there is the capacity for us to be more agile and adaptive in bringing those changes into place.
If you could also elaborate a bit on UNICEF's role here under different verticals. For example, the information, fake news, dealing with misinformation. That's very, very crucial, especially when we talk about children, extremely vulnerable bracket. And there is also the sense of mental anxiety when you have to tell the child you have to wear a mask or sanitize. Is it essential, first of all? Let's understand. For the parents, what would you like to say?
So for the parents, firstly, it's essential. This information, this change in behavior, this adopting this behavior is crucial. For parents, for families, for institutions, even in our own offices. When I've come here, you have a whole system in place to make sure that we keep our hands sanitized. For the children, it's also where do we find the reassurance? So, for example, how are we going to adapt our education so that children are still learning? What about the internet connectivity? Does everyone have it? What special measures are we putting in place? What sort of games can we have? You know, we're probably going to see in all households, we're returning to board games. Ludo, Carom, you know, things that we've played previously and have forgotten about. It's how do we keep the anxiety low, but also recognizing that there will be instances when anxiety is high. Where do we get in touch with? Who do we get in touch with?
And that gap in education learning that will come eventually. We don't know, are we looking at 1 month period, 2 month period? The schools and educational institutions are shut. The e-learning bit of it, and that's not something which is accessible to everyone.
Yes? So this is an opportunity to really fast track whatever initiatives we have for e-learning. How can we fast track them and be able so that even the poorest household, the children, are not being deprived of it?
That's very
I think for UNICEF, the information, getting the messaging out is crucial. Having the whole of government response in I think our Ministry of Health is doing an amazing job of bringing everyone together, and really kudos to our colleagues. And that's where the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Youth Affairs, Sports, how can they be also taking in what the ministries are going to take forward? It's really important that we see this as a total mobilization, but in a way that makes us think creatively on how to take it forward.
And it is, Dr. Haque, a total mobilization, so to say. The first question that we would, I wanted UNICEF to react on it, but that's okay. The testing abilities, the laboratories, because I believe our government is already working on it in terms of roping in private players, also adding more laboratories in the current corpus that we have, the private laboratories. But where does WHO really come in place here? Your chief says that, I was just reading some research papers, I'll just quote him, test everyone who shows symptoms. But then here you have, you're looking at a population. If you start testing everyone, that's going to put unnecessary pressure on the system. What would be your advice, especially the current situation in India?
I think that there are several issues we need to look at. We need to look at from in which stage the country is in the outbreak, and also the capacities available. Testing is of course extremely important. You need to know from what's happening. And I was very encouraged over the last days, and I was also been discussing with Dr. Balram from ICMR and also with the Ministry of Health. At this very moment, India is both in scope and in capacities they are increasing. The scope is widening. The scope initially was very much dealing with imported cases, and then from the index case to look at the context and looking at healthcare workers who were actually also dealing with the patients. But now I think the scope is now widening. And what's now happening
Are you saying that we're at the brink of stage 2 and not really into stage 3?
No, not yet. And it was very encouraging also to hear. You might have seen the results from the Director General ICMR, what they did from mid-February. They did some sampling of what we call severe acute respiratory infections, the SARI, and from the ILI, the influenza-like illnesses. And these were independent and not related to travel history or having been in contact with any known case. Now, these test results came out, and I think there were about 900 samples were taken, and it was done over a period of 4 weeks. And if I'm not mistaken, it was about 50 areas that they looked at, and fortunately they came out negative. So that gives us a bit of a temperature from what is happening in other places. But it's very important. We have continued the discussion also with the Ministry and also with the Director ICMR, and I think what's now going to happen, the SARI, the severe acute respiratory infections, more samples will be taken on a far more routine basis for people in the hospitals. So that helps us now, because we have the imported cases as one phase. The second case is local transmission, when there's from the index case.
But where do you see the volume? Do you see more volume now here in the local cases, or?
No, the volume, I think in this case you need to have reflecting a little bit globally. I'm from a small country, 17 million citizens, the Netherlands, and we have 2,000 cases in the Netherlands. At this very moment we have about 200 cases here in India. And I think in India we are still dealing with the imported cases and some local transmission, and now making sure that you set up a system that you early start detecting, is there any community-wide transmission?
Yes.
Because then I go back to
that is what we have to stop.
No, the thing is, you need to detect it early.
Yes.
Because it might already happen. And here you come back to this is very important, that you strengthen your surveillance system, the IDSP, the Integrated Disease Surveillance Systems program, and that you put up mechanisms.
You flagged a very pertinent point, making your surveillance system extremely robust. I'm going to have a reaction from Niti Aayog Health Representative, Dr. Paul, but before that, we're going to take a very short break. When we come back on DD Dialogue, we're going to now also focus on precautions, challenges, battling fake news. That's extremely crucial, and how India, under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, is much ahead of curve in terms of dealing with the situation. There's absolutely no need to panic. That's what WHO and UNICEF representatives are telling us on this show. A short break. We'll be back with more. Please don't touch that remote. We'll be back. Welcome back to DD Dialogue. In fact, now we will be also talking about surveillance system, as this is a very important point raised by Dr. Hendrik, India representative WHO. Dr. Paul, surveillance is very important. Prime Minister came up with the concept, curfew for the people, by the people, and I think the sense that we get is that this is the concept which has been hailed by the nation as a whole, because Prime Minister's that half an hour outreach, half an hour or so, was very it was a very intense outreach to the country as a whole, and I think that has worked voluntarily, and it's not something, if you look at other countries, severe restrictions have been imposed. As compared to that, we're urging people, and Prime Minister is reaching out to people, but at the same time the surveillance point raised by WHO, that is very important. Are we well equipped?
We are in a very good position, because over the years, and in fact with the help of WHO, we have instituted a very robust integrated disease surveillance system in our country. And the fact that we are able to trace and track the contacts in hundreds and thousands at any given time is testimony to that system being functional across the country. I think what we often don't talk about is the task done by the NCDC through the IDSP. We're very often hearing, you know, the ICMR system, which is serving a very important but a slightly different purpose. The routine surveillance system, even today, perhaps more than 50,000 people are being watched for their problem, and these are the contacts in for a given case. Let's say there are at times hundreds of them which are under watch, and the data is coming real time and is being plotted and being watched. So I think we are in a reasonably good shape. We are much better prepared compared to, let's say, H1N1 situation a few years ago.
Yes.
We also have virology laboratories, a network of virology laboratories across the country, which is now coming so handy. That capacity is very, very much useful. We also must not forget that there is a third cluster of laboratories that are available with the Department of Biotechnology, with the CSIR laboratories, and also in the private sector. So we have a very good footprint in our country of laboratory setup. What we are doing is being nuanced about how to put our resources and how to create a system which is economical and yet very, very informative. And that's where the stage of the disease comes in.
Yes.
I have a query for Dr. Paul. Can I?
Yes,
Can I
please.
play your role?
No, please. I'll be more than happy, sir.
Thank you. Dr. Paul, I could be wrong, but what I have been reading is that we have about 200,000 test kits at the moment, and all are being imported through WHO. And that we have asked for local kits, and some proposals have been submitted. So I wanted to understand two things. One, how much time will it take us to approve the local kits? And I believe the imported kits are costing us about 5,000 to 7,000 rupees, or about $80 to $100. How competitive would it become price-wise once we have the local kits?
Well, first let me correct. We had till a few days ago 100,000, 1 lakh kits. We have ordered 1 million kits more, and they are in the pipeline. They may already be arriving any of these days. So for a rational surveillance, as well as responding to the needs of individuals who are exposed or having symptoms, we are in good shape. But we are deliberately being strategic about it, because we do import a probe. There are 3 components to a diagnostic kit. You need a positive control, you have a primer, and a probe. It's a probe that is imported from another country, and that is the number that I'm talking about. So we have enough mass of these diagnostic kits at the moment. We have enough to handle the situation.
The flights are not operating now.
We have it. This will be a priority. If there is a need for this to be done, to be carried from anywhere, it will be done. In addition to this, we are exploring and we are working on at least 4 to 5 to 7 potential diagnostic kits which are novel, which are adapting the technology that exists, but uses the products of the virus to make it COVID specific, because this is a new animal in the zoo. It wasn't there 5 months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago. And we had our isolate only, by the way, 10 days ago, 15 days ago, our first viral culture. So we are now using the virus that's now available to us to standardize and validate at least 4 to 6 such diagnostic kits developed by our own institutions and also by some private.
A very good piece of news coming in.
And we have created a high-level empowered group to make sure that both diagnostic kits, also vaccine, as well as new therapies will be fast-tracked through our regulatory system and through the research system.
So there is no sense of alarm. I mean, if some cities in Maharashtra have been in lockdown stage, this is a very, very temporary situation. And Dr. Haque, would you like to add a word here? Because again, now speculations after these cities in Maharashtra, could it be Delhi next or other states next?
Yes, I think that there are a few things. We're now in a stage of the outbreak, and what we're most likely still in the beginning of the epicurve. But what it means that the number of new cases being added. But an epicurve is very important, and I think you've seen it also from the other countries, is that what you need to do with measurements, you try to flatten that curve in order for the health system to be able to cope.
And how do we do that?
Now, India has a very good start. It started being very seriously from the onset. The numbers at this very moment are still very low, and with support from the Prime Minister, we already start. In this case, we're going for social distancing. And with all these, I think it will have a major influence on the epi curve. And that means that we will be able, and we're doing two things. We flatten the epi curve in order for the health system to be able to cope with it, but also something else. And Dr. Vinapol was already mentioning. We're also buying time to start developing better diagnostics. Because at this time, the diagnostic what we have is the throat flap, but we also hope that serological tests can also be done, which is a little bit more easy. And if the serological test if you have the serological test, from an epidemiological point of view, you can do far much more easy research. The second one is the medication. Globally is already happening, and that's an issue that WHO is also coordinating. We already get results now from China over the next coming weeks. From they have done some medication, and we can see what has happened. Also, WHO is globally coordinating these trials on the medical part, and the other part is the vaccine. For the vaccine, I think we always have to be realistic about the timelines. There's one or two countries who are a little bit ahead, but still we might be waiting for 12 to 18 months before it will become available. And I think that's also important.
Yes, please. But Dr. Haque, there are a couple of points. One is the WHO itself has been saying that India should be testing more, community testing. That is not me, but WHO saying that. Secondly, South Korea, if I got it right, after the initial outbreak, one of the reasons they managed to check it was community testing in a large scale. So given that fact, where are we at the curve, and how widespread should the testing be?
No, and I think with these discussions, actually yesterday I was part of that advisory group. We are now looking for tools that looks at early detection if there is any community-wide distribution, transmission, which I think is very important. And I was very encouraged by it. But I said they're widening the scope, because before they were looking at imported cases and contacts. But they're now looking at we need to have tools that we early start detecting from what is happening in the community. And I think that is very encouraging. But also at the same time, like Dr. Vinapol was already saying, you need to start increasing the capacities. And the capacities that is under the ICMR is now moved from, it was first 13, then we had 52, we think we're now 70, and I think 120 is being planned. But what's also very encouraging now is these kits, they are commercially being made available. At this very moment, ICMR is validating these kits. If these can become available, then we can also rein in the private sector. So it is important from both to widen the scope, like you were indicating. You need to look at getting a system in place that you can look at community-wide distribution, but also increasing the capacity.
And I think the way Dr. Paul has put in, everything is being done, and the capacity building, there's no need to, but then that question of
tests.
Medical workers, medical practitioners, those who are relentlessly working in these quarantines. Now there is also the sense, anxiety, and they're also vulnerable to infection. There are a lot of misinformation, fake news that's making rounds. What I want to ask from you, sir, is also that are we also looking at their well-being? This is because Prime Minister also touched this point.
Well, if the Prime Minister has emphasized this and earlier tweeted about it, conveyed in unequivocal terms, I think the nation is very respectful of the profession, and the profession, not just doctors but nurses, paraprofessionals, and the helpers in our hospitals, I think the ambulance drivers, all of them who are risking their own lives to look after us and others need to be saluted. And I think the sentiment of the Honorable Prime Minister has touched the chord when he expressed this in his own address yesterday. So there is, and also on the Janta curfew day at 5 p.m. there will be a national gratitude to these workers and many more. I think this will, help build the morale and the determination of the health professionals to rise to the occasion and to do the best as their dharma and karma.
Resolve and restraint. I can see you smiling, ma'am. That is something, like our panelists pointed out, that is something which has touched the chord. But then we have larger challenges also. UNICEF especially, we were talking about children, we were talking about the psychological aspect associated with it. And this is not a situation which is just confined to a day or a week. We're looking, what is the long-run plan, the long-run strategy? And what kind of advisories is UNICEF now, looking forward, going to come up with?
So you're very right that this is not going to go away in a matter of days. It's going to take months to address or to contain the disease, to help the people who are affected recover, and then for the economy, the livelihoods and everything else to recover from it. And I think the message coming through is that not to panic, not to get alarmist, but to have that sense of urgency. So how can we have a sense of urgency without panicking? And for that, the right information, the right actions, and that a bit of a forward thinking. So for example, while we're urgently putting in place all measures to help contain the spread of COVID, at the same time, children are being born every day.
Yes.
Women are pregnant. You know, sick children who are newborn are going to be falling sick. We are going to be seeing the ongoing challenges we face with abuse and exploitation. How do we not lose sight of everything else? So having those critical services, but being creative in how we address it. Now the Village Health and Nutrition Day is a core strategy for how we have been able to, you know, increase immunization rates, really get the information out on how to combat malnutrition, to have children being weighed. So all the challenges that children are already facing, we need to be creative on how we continue with that.
And what is UNICEF doing?
So for us, we're really working closely with the different sectors that we engage with to look at, so what does it mean? How can we look at alternate options for these services? How do we make sure that we don't drop a service? The helplines that women and children have, are they being seen as a critical service? Are they insured? In the family, how do we support families in keeping the calm and not, you know, keeping children away from the stress that they might face? Because we know that in households, when children face stress, when they face disharmony, when they face violence, that effect is lifelong. And for the women, especially I think our women workers who are at the forefront, the Asha, Anganwadi, the A&M, the nurses, the midwives.
Is Niti Aayog also taking account of this aspect? Very important.
Yes, indeed. We have to, and we have to see how it is impacting on fundamental public health services in a holistic way. That's a very, very important message, a very important need that we are communicating to our state governments and trying to work together to find whatever best we can do. Indeed.
Okay. I'm going to take quick comments. We're in the final leg of the show. Dr. Chaturvedi, supply chain not being fragmented. There are disturbances, let's face it, but the government is at it. In fact, yesterday Prime Minister announced task force, but our Finance Minister has been at it since the advent of this crisis in the country. Very quickly, quick points from you, sir, in terms of containing this at the domestic economic front. Quick 5 points.
No, definitely. I think as Yasmin also echoed, and I fully endorse that, the very idea that the informal sector is in the firing line, and that's what Prime Minister alerted all the well-offs to take care of, be that as part of whatever sector, whatever industry, and we have to see that those who are out of the formal payment systems, they are taken care of.
Yes.
And she did mention about their kids, their families. So I think that's one very important message this panel has brought out as part of the economic sort of a package that we need to take care of. Second is, as I said, the supply chains are getting fragmented, and that fragmentation has to be taken care of. How much time it would take depends on all other sectors, and as Dr. Paul very rightly articulated, in the pharmaceutical sector, more and more efforts are being made, so that is on track. Third, I have already mentioned the measures that have been taken by the Reserve Bank of India, so that's there. Fourth point is in terms of the new task force that Prime Minister has constituted under the chairmanship of the Finance Minister, which, as I said, has taken on account 7 ministries, so that I think is absolutely important.
So all is being done to minimize the trade and economic impact of it, work under progress. Diplomatic level,
yes.
The larger message that has gone across to the world, Prime Minister Modi as the global leader.
That's precisely what I wanted to talk about, that and one more bit. Now, you know, what one sees is happening is that first and foremost, the responsibility of the leadership is towards the nation. So those steps have been taken to put systems in place. Having put systems in place, although there's still a lot to do, Prime Minister reached out to the SAARC region and offered India's abilities, India's infrastructure, put on the table $10 million of emergency funds and also training and equipment and a rapid task force. So that is, and I believe that Maldives and Bhutan have already reached out to India for seeking some assistance. Also, initiative is something that I was very happy about, and it looks like that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia will be calling for a G20 video summit next week. So again, because the global best practices need to come together and all hands have to be on the deck. So that is two. Coming back to the impact of global coronavirus and also the social distancing that we are talking about. There is one aspect that I would request our experts to comment on if they can. As urbanization is happening, India is going vertical. Now, in the high-rise buildings, how do you maintain social distancing? Because there are the elevators, there are common facilities.
That's a challenging part.
That is the challenging part, and other countries have faced it, and India is facing it. So I don't know how to handle that.
Well, as they say, we will cross the bridge when we'll come to it. But on a serious note, yes, I'm going to take final comments from you both. On a serious note, we will cross the bridge when we'll come to it. But at the end of the day, we are doing everything possible to see to it that the situation doesn't get alarming. UNICEF and WHO, your final message to the viewers or to those who are watching and listening to you on the national broadcaster. What's the larger message that goes out?
So I think the larger message is that this is something that's going to affect us all. We have to probably look at three
Are we well
things.
equipped to deal with it?
As long as we listen to facts and not fear, as long as we're looking at really being patient and not panicking, and as long as we are in solidarity and not towards stigma, these are the three core things that no matter which angle we look at from, as a group, as individuals, we need to be focusing on it.
I think Yasmin said a few wonderful things already. I think I would like to look at two things, on solidarity and also a glimmer of hope, or the evidence of hope. The solidarity is, when I listen to the Prime Minister's speech, I think there was also a lot about solidarity and supporting each other, and I think that's we need now. You need to engage the community. You need to do it jointly, and he was appealing to this one, and it was a very strong message. And I think that's something.
I think you've been really touched by Prime Minister.
No, I think that was very touching.
Yeah.
But it's also but also the other part is also true. The solidarity among countries. India supplied China PPE when it was needed. Now there are discussions going on, and people like myself, we are in discussion also through the WHO country offices. We hope that China gets back to business, and that's also the whole part. If we look at China, if we look at South Korea, if we look at Singapore, then I think we can also come to one conclusion. Let me finish this one. This is very important.
Yes, I'll have a reaction and we wrap
because this is very important. Like my Director General said, this is the first pandemic, but we also think can be controlled. Look at these three countries. They are controlling it, and that is something what we need not to forget. It is possible, and with the efforts what India this fair moment.
But hasn't India managed to arrest it at the very, very outset?
No, we're still in the process.
Okay.
I think we need still to see how things are going.
Yes.
But I'm with you that India starts already having this very strong measurement in the early part, and that is very hopeful.
India has started very early, and Dr. V.K. Paul, member NITI Aayog. Finally, WHO has hailed the process. So far, so good. So has UNICEF. But then we cannot rest on these laurels because we have an uphill task ahead. We're all geared up, are we?
I think the Prime Minister's intervention yesterday has pushed the entire country.
No, but this whole comparison to China, I think
totally different level of preparedness.
Yes.
We
so
have
there's no need to compare
gears.
with China.
Yeah, we are following the curve of the outbreak as it exists today in our context, in our demography, our geography, and our nuances. So what has happened since yesterday, I would say, is that we are in a totally different mode now, and having people taking charge of their own health and the health of their neighbors and their families and everybody else, bringing that as a concerted move, as a systematic voluntary movement to the fore is something which will go as an inflection point in our fight against this virus. Even as we prepare for the worst, I think we are geared up very well compared to other nations, and we will do very well.
Extremely well put, sir, on that positive note, that we are prepared for the worst, coming in from a very distinguished panel here. Dr. Haque Paul, Member Health, Niti Aayog, that we are prepared to deal with the worst, but whatever the situation is right now, even WHO and UNICEF contends there is no need to panic. Situation is pretty much under control and things are really being taken care of, even when we talk about its imperative impact in terms of minimizing the damage on domestic front, trade front, etc. But what really comes first and foremost is the national health, nation's health, and that is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been categorically reaching out to the countrymen as a whole. Take care of yourself. The Janata curfew has certainly struck the chord. On that note, thank you very much, Dr. Henrik Beckerdam, representative to India World Health Organization, and very, very thank you, ma'am. Also, Dr. Yasmin Haque, UNICEF India representative, thanking Ambassador Vishnu Prakash. He's also served as official spokesperson of the MEA, and also RIS Director General, Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi, and also thanking Dr. Haque Paul, Member Health, Niti Aayog. With that, that's all we have for you in this edition of DD Dialogue. Thank you so much for tuning in. Namaskar.